Today we're talking about inflammation, and we'll talk a little bit about eyebright and turmeric. So inflammation, here's what inflammation is. People hear the word inflammation, it's pretty negative these days, but inflammation is by design. It is really, really useful. And so you don't want to get rid of inflammation. The previous medical thinking actually was involved a lot in getting rid of inflammation, and inflammation was seen as something that the body did that wasn't very useful. But now we're learning more about it, and crazy, it's like the body is designed beautifully or something like that. Anyway, inflammation, very useful, very helpful, very necessary for the body as it deals with things like infection and injury. It can become harmful to the body when you're looking at long-term chronic stress-related inflammation. But as we'll talk about this, just because it's long-term and chronic doesn't mean that it's not there for a reason. And so if there's injury, damage, infection, if there's a problem, inflammation's job is to come help create an environment where it can be fixed. So it's protective. Inflammation is protective. It's an immune response. And so it does 5 basic things. Sometimes people think of them as 4 things. They leave out the last part, but you can either way, you're getting the idea. Inflammation is known for redness. And so redness is a sign that there's more blood rushing to the area. So of course that area becomes redder. Capillaries are enlarging. They're creating much more blood flow toward the area. All that increase in blood flow also increases heat. And so that area not only is more red, but it's hotter. Being hot is useful because heat kills many viruses and bacteria. Even a few degrees higher heat will kill those bacteria and viruses. And so that heat is not just the accidental result of blood flow. Again, heat by design. This is very useful for getting rid of pathogens. And so when you're injured, there's the opportunity for all kinds of things to get in a wound. When you're infected, of course, we're talking about pathogens. And so you need this increased heat to get rid of, to kill those pathogens. Swelling, extraordinarily useful when you realize what it does. And so what the immune response does in inflammation is it creates this swelling, but it sort of puts this boundary around the problem. And so when you look at inflammation, your inflammation isn't like your entire body necessarily. It's around that particular area where you have the infection or where you have the injury. And what happens is you kind of have this swelling that happens within that area. That area is blocked off in some, immune-wise, it's blocked off from the rest of the body. And so it's harder to get in and out, so the pathogens are trapped there, so they're not flowing all through your body. They're trapped in that immediate area. And so the increased heat, the increased blood flow, that brings all of those immune cells to that area. They want those cells to stay. I'm like anthropomorphizing everything. But, the idea is the cells, the immune cells stay in that area, the pathogens stay in that area, so it all can be fixed in that area. Pain, of course, is a part of inflammation because you have all this stimulus to all these nerve endings, and sometimes loss of function happens. Healing is necessary. And loss of function is a useful thing. You can't be using something and healing it some of the times. Okay, so the goal here is heal the injury, overcome the pathogen. The goal in injury and infection is not to get rid of the inflammation. Medical science used to think that that was the goal. Here you've broken something or you have an infection. Oh my gosh, let's control the inflammation quick. Get rid of it. And that was a very well-established, well-accepted idea. But now what they're finding is, shockingly, inflammation helps. And of course, this makes sense to me because I'm thinking your body is made for reasons. And one of those reasons is to function really well. And so inflammation is not an accident. So they found what they call a pro-resolving program. So the language there kind of cracks me up, but that's what they're calling it, a pro-resolving program in the inflammation that helps stimulate wound healing. Well, of course it does. Of course it does. But so now inflammation is seen as much more useful and not something to get rid of. Now, with chronic inflammation, here we have a problem that is continuing. So you have acute inflammation, that's an infection or an injury. The injury heals, the inflammation goes away. Chronic inflammation isn't just inflammation that just went out of control. It's there for a reason. There's a reason for you to have that inflammation. For example, if you have plaque in your blood, arteriosclerosis, you have damage to blood vessels. Well, when you have damage to blood vessels, your body's going to try and heal that damage. Remember how we talked about cholesterol? Cholesterol is kind of part of that package that the body has that will help go heal damage. And so inflammation is there to try to help heal the damage. Problem is that people aren't doing anything generally to really help deal with that damage in most ways. And so they think that they can just continue to go have the same damaging diet, drink the same damaging things, do the same kind of not exercising, etc., with your body. That will just continue the damage. And then, of course, the inflammation is chronic. It's constantly trying to get rid of damage. Obesity creates inflammation because the body is not in a natural, healthy state. And so inflammation is there trying to help heal. So if we keep the damage coming through our stress, diet, environmental problems, etc., the body will keep trying to fix those problems, hence continued inflammation. We eat pro-inflammatory foods. One of the things that I did very first, when I really got it and thought, okay, this is a thing, this whole healthy eating thing, this is really important. When I really figured that out, the first thing I did was I went through every single thing in my kitchen. And if it had high fructose corn syrup in it, I got rid of it. That I was surprised actually at how many things had high fructose corn syrup in it. It was a little crazy. I mean, ketchup, all kinds of things. So I just put them all in a big box. I had to get another box and got rid of everything. I didn't want to give it away even because it's like giving away damage. I don't want to do that. That's not a nice friend. And so I just decided I'm just going to buy alternatives that don't contain high fructose corn syrup. And I could find alternatives for, I think, every single thing except for Worcestershire sauce. And I thought, well, okay, so I'll just either hardly ever use Worcestershire sauce or not use it. And that was fine. But everything else was easy to find an alternative for. Organic ketchup doesn't have high fructose corn syrup in it. It wasn't really significantly more expensive. Trans fats, also, same thing. Just get rid of everything with trans fats in it. Think of it like you're eating little pieces of plastic. Vegetable oils, refined carbs like white flours, that sort of thing is pro-inflammatory. Alcohol, of course. Cooking your meat at high temperatures. Processed meats, lunch meats, those sorts of things. Those contain advanced glycation endpoints. Or end products. And so all of these are pro-inflammatory foods. And so changing your diet is a really great step toward reducing inflammation. You want to think about, even if you just do a little bit, you say you have soda every day, try doing soda once a week, try doing soda then eventually once a month or so. And maybe once a month is fine. Maybe that's so much better than once a day. And maybe you can find alternatives that you like. The idea here is you're not so much giving up things as it is you're substituting or you're adding good things, including anti-inflammatory foods instead of getting rid of other foods. I think that's more useful way to create change is adding in instead of taking away. Okay, inflammation not only is a problem with your health in general, It's also associated with depression. And so this started like in the late 2000s, around 2007, 2009. This kind of research started popping up saying, hey, we're noticing depression and inflammation seem to really go together. In fact, eventually the idea became depression is an inflammatory disease. Depression is related to inflammation, and the scientific data is pretty clear, pretty clear. It's a inflammatory problem. Here's one example of an article. There's a lot of articles now that it's 2020. There's a lot of articles out there looking at this. Here we've got a pro-inflammatory diet. Think about what you eat. Is it pro-inflammatory? Could be. Is it associated? Here we have it associated with increased odds of depression symptoms in Iranian female adolescents. And so they're doing a cross-sectional study. So they're looking at a bunch of people at one time, 88 females. 30% had a moderate level of depression, and the people with the most pro-inflammatory diet had higher depression scores and a higher odds ratio of having depression, where the ones that were having the least anti-inflammatory diets had less of a risk of depression. So depression and inflammation go together. Depression, anxiety, inflammation. It's hard for you to manage your feelings, your emotions, when your body is really suffering. It makes it harder. Heart disease has been associated really strongly with inflammation and with depression. There seems to be a huge impact of depression in heart disease patients, and it's because that inflammation is shared. Your gut biome. So this is wouldn't it be great to get into this in this class? And we just don't even have time. It would like be a whole class in and of itself, the idea of probiotics and the gut biome. But gut biome is totally associated with inflammation. If your gut is unhappy, your microbiome has an overabundance of harmful microorganisms as opposed to helpful, that is strongly associated with inflammation and with depression. Inflammation is associated with things like diabetes. And there's something called type 3 diabetes. They're calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes. They've been doing this for years now, but it's another indicator of how inflammation affects the brain. And diabetes is a part of inflammation that will affect the brain. You have diabetes, you have trouble monitoring or managing blood sugar, your body does. That's connected with inflammation, and it eventually results in things like Alzheimer's. Okay, now let's talk about oxidative stress. You've heard antioxidant a lot, or you've heard free radicals, maybe something called reactive oxygen species, maybe ROS. So oxidative stress happens all the time. It's a normal part of your body functioning. Normal metabolism, normal enzymes that create reactions, exercise even, lots of things cause oxidation. This is okay. It's okay, it's normal. Your body is built to use some of that. And so a little bit of that is actually used by the body for really positive things. It can help with your immune system. It can help kind of explode some pathogens. It's I think on the next screen I have how it helps. So let me stop and I'll wait till there. So oxidation happens throughout the body. You're basically losing some ions in that molecule, and so that chemical instability is what makes us call it reactive. And oxidation happens with stress. Psychological stress creates more oxidation. Physiological stress creates more oxidation. So oxidation can help these unstable oxidized molecules can be used for cell messaging, for helping cell death, helping with gene expression, but it can also damage. And so those cells can be damaging to the cells around them as they're like trying to balance their ions again. So most plants are antioxidant to some extent, just like most plants are anti-inflammatory to some extent. And so if you kind of think about how we're created for this earth, the earth and us are all one. We're all created together. We're meant to eat these plants. And since we naturally have some level of oxidation in our system, if we're taking in plants every day, like I think we're intended to be eating lots of plants, those plants naturally take care of that. Plants are naturally, in large part, antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, and they will give us all kinds of help in that moment. The plants, when we talk about plants having generally a blood thinning effect, that blood thinning effect is short term. It's not like a long-term blood thinner. It's sort of like a short-term thing to just sort of help with digestion of that food then in that moment. And so it's not the same thing as being put on a blood thinner, but it does have blood thinning help. And so plants, very, very useful, very helpful for the human body. Here are a number of kinds of things that are anti-inflammatory. And when I look at ways of treating depression, all of these things treat depression. Sleep is a treatment, helps with depression. Exercise, for sure. Probiotics, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids. All of those things are helpful for depression. Mushrooms can be very anti-inflammatory. We're going to talk about those. I think it's the last day of class, mushrooms. Honey, anti-inflammatory. Many, 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 many herbs. In general, plant foods, all anti-inflammatory. And so now let's just talk about turmeric and eyebright. So turmeric is a plant. It's from India. They use the root. You can buy turmeric roots. And turmeric contains an active ingredient called curcumin. Most people are really excited about curcumin, and we kind of forget about turmeric. But it appears, and this research is continuing, and it's becoming more and more clear via the research that turmeric, whole turmeric, it's like a theme here. We're talking about whole plants, not extracted components. And so the whole turmeric is much more than just a carrier for curcumin, right? It has an independent contribution to a lot of the medicinal effects of curcumin. Curcumin got pulled out of turmeric and studied a lot. People are crazy for curcumin, but the whole turmeric is also extremely useful. Use it in curries, use it in a lot of different helpful, what they call functional food kind of things. One problem with turmeric, if you're going to go out and buy turmeric, be very, very careful, because it's easy for it to be adulterated by lead. Some of this is because fertilizers used in the countries that are really growing turmeric had a lot of lead, and so or arsenic, etc. So in some ways, soils were contaminated. But there are instances, particularly in Bangladesh, where you have people who are growing turmeric or processing turmeric who are purposely adding a colorant to it called lead chromate. That colorant makes it more gold yellow. It makes it brighter. And so the people think, oh, if it's brighter, then that means it's better, it's more healthy. And so they want to buy it because it gives that food that really bright yellow gold color. And the reason it looks so much more bright is because they've added lead chromate in it to give it this bright color. Now, really, really high quality turmeric can look pretty bright yellow gold. And so they're trying to make it look like they're maybe substandard turmeric, or maybe the turmeric that didn't end up getting the coloring. Maybe it was in a flood. Maybe it's just, is good, but didn't get that coloring. They'll give it that coloring. And this has been going on for like 30 years in these countries. And so you want to not buy cheapo turmeric. It's very likely to have be contaminated with lead or some other heavy metals. And so I would be very careful about your source for turmeric. You can buy good quality turmeric, but you have to know the company that you're buying from and make sure that you're getting a good source, something that is not contaminated by lead. Even organic doesn't necessarily mean perfect, and so you just have to know the company. Modern science says, so these are results from what current scientific method. So antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, of course. We see that turmeric can help with metabolic syndrome. So that's where you have trouble with obesity, trouble with high blood pressure, and trouble with blood sugar management. And so metabolic syndrome can be a real problem for health, and it is very high in inflammation. It's very related to inflammation. And so turmeric can really help with metabolic syndrome. It does more than just anti-inflammatory things, but that's sort of like the big deal. Arthritis can help with arthritis pain. Turmeric helps with anxiety and depression. It is neuroprotective, protective of your brain. It reduces your excess blood lipids like cholesterol and triglycerides. It will induce inflammation that's exercise induced. And so a lot of times people go exercise, and exercise will oxidize and it will inflame. That's normal. And so when you come home and you eat really great plant-based foods, then that will help your body heal from that and make exercise a wonderful positive thing for you. So turmeric can be helpful for that. Randomized controlled trial looking at specifically depression and anxiety with turmeric. Patients, 56 patients randomized to either get a placebo or to get curcumin. Okay, so this isn't whole turmeric. This study was just using curcumin. And so the results after 8 weeks showed curcumin reduced both depression and anxiety. And the cool thing was, even in patients who were kind of considered treatment resistant, or like, what they had been doing had not been working at all for them, they saw significant gains in reduction of depression using curcumin. Eyebright is another herb. Eyebright is typically thought of to help with the health of the eye, but it has also kind of a larger use of helping increase kind of flow. And so it will help thin mucus. It will help like increase that lymph flow kind of thing. And so when we're looking again, I think I ended the last lecture on this idea of flow and increasing the flow, getting your body to kind of have like the river that goes through it, just increasing and easy going. Eyebright will help with that. And so it helps with mucous membranes in general. It helps clear them and clean them out. And so it's very helpful for cold, for cough. It will increase your circulation, but it specifically does also help with eyes. And so it will specifically help eye circulation. You know that there's more blood and oxygen. More oxygen comes to the eye as a result of Eyebright. And so that increase in blood nutrients and in oxygen will help with, and the anti-inflammatory action will help with eye redness, eye swelling, things like conjunctivitis, etc. Many people do report improved vision as a result of Eyebright. And we know scientifically that there's studies showing it can protect things like your cornea from UV damage, etc. But if you think of it in terms of Eyebright, reducing inflammation, increasing flow, more oxygenation, more blood flow, more circulation, that sort of a thing, you'll be right on. So Eyebright could be really helpful for those kinds of things, and a great example of an herb that helps the eyes and is anti-inflammatory. All right, that's it for today for turmeric and Eyebright. We're also going to talk about anxiety and depression, St. John's wort, and passion flower. So stay tuned for that.